Can I replace Windows with Wine? I will buy a new computer and install Kubuntu on it. The only kind of software that I would run on Windows are PC games. Can I play most of Windows games without problems with Wine on Linux? If Wine cannot run games, how much of disk partition is recommended to install Windows and PC games? Can Windows read extension 4 partitions?
I would first check to see if the games that you are playing have a Linux port already. This way you could avoid using Wine or Parallels in order to play them. I haven't had great experience running newer Windows games, especially newer FPS titles, through an emulator such as Wine. As far as partitioning your HDD to dual boot Windows and Linux, if you are going to be in Windows most of the time playing games, I would devote about 60% of the HDD space to Windows and the other 40% to your Linux installation. Windows cannot read extension 4 partitions as far as I know. Although I do believe that there are a few programs out there that will let you browse the partitions from within Windows.
You can run games on Wine, but the performance will not be very good at all. I would suggest partitioning. There is no set limit on the size of the partitions, but you will want to give it a decent amount as some PC games can take up quite a bit of space.
Gaming suggestions. If you play lightweight indie games, games that use OpenGL or older DirectX games, you should be fine, but check for support. If you play games that use DirectX 9, check and make sure they are supported. If you play games that use DirectX 10 of 11 and like to get new releases, don't even bother trying. If you just want to play your games and not be concerned about OS issues or support for that new game that is coming out, then use Windows. Linux suggestion. You might want to try installing Linux inside Windows so they share the same partition using something like Woobi. You should also consider using a VM running Linux in full screen or with something like VMware Unity so you can get you Linux applications and not have to reboot the computer constantly. Partition suggestions. You can use a third-party application in Windows for reading extension 4 file systems. Here is a write-up on some of them, but you would have better luck reading/writing to NTFS from Linux using NTFS 3G, so I would recommend you give the majority of the space to the Windows partition and give your Linux partition like 40 GB or so depending on what you are doing on it. If you have a 1/2/3 TB HDD, then you could partition off like 500 GB for Windows/games and you should be perfectly fine unless you are installing a ton of games. You can create an NTFS partition for Windows and extension 4 for Linux and a FAT32 mutual partition for sharing files as both systems support it.
In all honesty, it highly depends on what kind of games you play. I've played Guild Wars, World of Warcraft and Counter-Strike Source for years on Wine and they were fine except minor annoyances here or there. Your best bet is to check this URL and decide for yourself. Edit. Also, if you're going with the Windows route, you can perfectly read/write to NTFS in Linux using NTFS 3G.
If you want to support the channel, please consider liking and subscribing.